Hello, college sports fans across the great state of Michigan and beyond. You are listening to the Union of the State podcast, the exclusive source for fan-driven insights into the greatest rivalry in college sports, the Michigan Wolverines versus the Michigan State Spartans. I'm Chicago Joe, repping the boys in blue, and I'm joined here with my cousin Good Guy Rick, who's our Sparty resident on this here podcast, and this is our college basketball, sort of in-depth analysis podcast. We'd like to break down what's happened so far into the season as we move into the second month. But before we get into that, would be remiss if we did not talk about the back-to-back Big Ten champions. Woo! Michigan took down Purdue as expected, and they complete the program's first ever 13-0 regular season. Tremendous accomplishment for everybody involved. It was definitely something that the fans had their sights set on at the beginning of the season, but a lot of people obviously had some question marks if that could be accomplished. And after a long, grueling 3-month regular season, 13 wins have been met, and they're on to the playoffs to face TCU in the Fiesta Bowl. So yeah, I'm just very excited about that. And I don't know, Rick. I mean, it definitely is. It's impressive to see, but on the flip side, for the first time as well, I think two Big Ten teams, or not the first time, but two Big Ten teams have made it into the playoffs. Ohio State backdooring their way in with USC's loss to Utah for the second time of the year.
Yeah, we just call it like we see it here, but I think we alluded to, that Michigan-TCU matchup, and obviously we're happy there were no shenanigans with the council there making that initial rematch of Michigan-Ohio State, because we'd seen that already. If it's going to happen, make them take down the juggernaut of Georgia and really earn it, which, I don't believe they have then. And that's after they blitzed my Spartans, but obviously, as well as I do, you can't guarantee on it unless you get that Big Ten championship. And, kudos to Michigan, 13-0, 12-1 in the last 2 years. Outstanding. You can't really brush it off just kind of like we did Purdue versus Michigan last week against TCU. Though Michigan's got to be a heavy favorite here. And I think, the line indicated something like 7 points. I mean, where I'm leaning after picking them against Ohio State.
Yeah, you're definitely right on that. One minor correction, 12-1 was their record last year. That one loss, of course, was to Michigan State. So I would be remiss if I did not mention that as well.
No, I did. I was saying 13-0 this year, 12-1 last year. For the 25-1 in the last 2 years.
Gotcha.
Super impressive.
I just wanted to give you something that you can hang your hat on there, of course, because this year not as much to be happy about as a Spartan fan. Well, had to give credit where credit is due. Michigan State, that was the one loss that Michigan suffered last year. But allow me to give credit where credit is due this time, and give kudos to Purdue, because I think they played exactly how I expected them to come out there. They were clearly underdogs. It was, I believe, a 15.5-point spread at kickoff. And that's obviously very, very, very hard to overcome. And Purdue played as well as I thought they could have in the first half. Thought their quarterback looked sharp. Aiden McConnell was completing a lot of passes into tight coverage. And on top of the nice passes that were being thrown, there was a very aggressive play calling scheme that was being done by the head coach, Jeff Brom, who after this game is going to be headed to Louisville, I saw. But he was pulling out all the stops. There was a fake punt in the second quarter. They were going for it in risky situations. They played kind of like how I saw Rutgers was playing against Michigan earlier in the year, where there was a lot of gimmicky plays being called, a lot of trickery. There was a fake flea flicker that Purdue called in the second half, I believe. So there was a lot of variety in the play calling, a lot of different schemes that they were throwing at Michigan, not only on the offensive side of the ball, but also on the defensive side of the ball. Different tactics that they were being used that, are typically, I don't mean this in any disrespect, but those are the things that you see from a team that knows that they have nothing to lose and everybody's already counted them out. And as a result, the game was quite close in the first half, as I think a lot of people kind of expected, including me. But Michigan, being the second half team that they are, found a way to pull away in the second half. through their usual suspects. Donovan Edwards continues to feast on the ground. The passing game was sharp when it needed to be. Didn't really see too many issues from Michigan all around, and really there's no need to beat a dead horse. I think Purdue played well. I think they kind of showed me that they deserve to at least be the winner of the Big Ten West, which isn't saying much, but I'll give them that. And then they showed up ready to fight. It was a 1-point game at halftime, but at the end of the day, the talent that Michigan has on the field compared to Purdue was just too much to overcome, and they covered handily, pulling away with a very similar score as to what we saw, against Ohio State. So all around a good game. I don't think there's too much more to be said, and I don't even know if you caught too much of the game. I know the ACC championship was on at the same time, and not like that was that great of a game anyways, but all eyes ahead now to TCU, which you and I both predicted last episode. And that was the one that I know Michigan fans wanted to have. Certainly didn't want a rematch to Ohio State right off the bat. And also, kind of want to see Georgia only when we have to, which, if it goes according to plan, will be in the championship game. But, again, great season by Michigan. A lot of great individual efforts. But also, it's just been a great team effort all year. People are stepping up when they're needed most. The defense gave up a lot of field goals and a lot of yards to Purdue, but they did not break. And it's starting to look like a bend-don't-break defense is emerging out here in Ann Arbor, which I know very well as a Bears fan because that's the defense that Lovie Smith employed for all those years when they brought Rex Grossman to the Super Bowl, notably. So I'm a big fan of that. It seems to work.
Be careful with it. This is a Michigan State fan telling you, be careful with the bend don't break defense.
When it breaks, it breaks.
When it broke, it broke.
And I guess, and we'll save this discussion for later, but, Georgia's no slouch, so if the bend don't break mantra is to carry forward, there better not be a lot of breaking, because that Georgia defense is definitely something to be feared, and one that will present the ultimate test, I believe, to Michigan. So we'll see how that goes, but I don't think I want to harp on this too much longer. It was a great season, but it's time to turn our eyes now to the hardwood floor. And now that we're into arena season, as the weather gets colder in Michigan and across the Midwest and Big Ten, there's a couple basketball teams that we're looking at here. I'm going to head it over to you, good guy Rick. Michigan State, I would say, off to a great start. I mean, you have the loss to Gonzaga. You probably should have won, but we can blame the wind. The wind on the aircraft carrier sort of presented a different situation than what we're used to seeing in any basketball contest. But, they followed that up with a very impressive win against Kentucky and also Villanova. So, a lot of good things to look forward to at Michigan State. A couple setbacks. Alabama, who took down North Carolina, kind of thumped the Spartans. And then Oregon followed that up. Or actually, no, Notre Dame, excuse me. So, a lot of things to look forward to here as we head into basketball season.
Yep, so, we're getting into the Big Ten basketball pregame here. Cheers to you, Chicago Joe. But yeah, that overall you summed it up well. I'd say a lot of Spartans, if you told them you'd be 6-4 after the first 10 games of your season, looking at the schedule, they've been like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But when you actually play the games, there's a lot of Spartans that are more on the borderline of failure already, and already calling out the lines from the summer. Izzo should have dipped into the transfer portal. We have 3 open scholarships on the team. A lot of youth, especially at the front court. Why didn't you tighten that position up? And we'll get into all that, but I do want to just, take it back to where you brought it up. 6-4, some ups and some downs. A lot of those, 2 of the losses against Alabama and Notre Dame, we were down 2 starters in Malik Hall and Jaden Akins. And then the Northwestern loss, which I, check the Twitter, certified Spartan killer, Bo Bowie, just coming back and doing his thing. And Jaden Akins came back for that one, but that's really the one that's, that's not a game you lose, especially at home with Malik Hall, I think. But, nonetheless, it's a game as, a featured program like Michigan State in basketball. You should win that game regardless. So if they would have lost to Penn State last night, you would have people saying, right in the old headlines, you see at least 1 point every season. Is Izzo done? Is this Izzo's last year? He's, his arrogance, or at least, because to Tom Izzo, he loves his guys, and he didn't want to see anyone transfer out if he brings someone in. And, I'm directly referring to Mady Sissoko there at our center position, he's a junior now and has never averaged more than 4 or 5 minutes a game. I don't even think, maybe towards the end of last season you hit that number, but if you look at the season as a whole, no chance. So he's getting his first crack at it, and that's a top 50 recruit ultimately. So I think in basketball especially, we forget that sometimes even high-end recruits that have all that raw talent, still need some time to develop. And we're so used to seeing the freshman, or who's going to be the lottery pick, the freshman or sophomore that came back for that second basketball season. Oftentimes forgetting about the people that can end up being a 4 or 5 year stud on your college basketball team. And a lot of times in college basketball, those are the guys that really help instill the winning culture and, they help give you that foundation to be successful year in and year out. Whereas we see a lot of Kentucky teams over the last couple of years, or even a Duke squad every now and then, that's kind of battling more adversity because you're playing with younger guys ultimately. And, that it's where that boom and bust national title comes in. And, yeah, you live by the sword, you die by the sword with some of those recruits that time. So, all in all, 6-4. You're finally getting some home games. MSU's played more games in the West Coast, or on the West Coast, than they have in their own home stadium. So it's time to start practicing in your own facility and getting better here. As I think they only have 3 games in the next 25 days after playing the last 9 games in the 20, pretty much the same span, 25 or 26 days like that. So this Michigan State team is going to be your typical coach Tom Izzo team. I will just as I've talked about some of the problems there in the front court, problems there at the forward position, missing a stud like Malik Hall, who's, I believe, with the exception of Joey Hauser, the most senior member of the team and team captain. But I do think this MSU basketball team features maybe the best backcourt in the Big Ten between Tyson Walker, A.J. Hoggard, and when Jaden Akins is healthy. I mean, those are 3 nasty guards to have to worry about that all bring in different elements too. Tyson Walker, more of your spot-up shooter. Jaden Akins, your athletic showstopper on both sides of the court. And then A.J. Hoggard, that defensive dog that has a knack for slicing through defenses there to get to the rim. But will they be able to, that backcourt be able to play at a level that can push MSU towards their ceiling? Or is the lack of the front court and wing the depths, especially on the defensive side of the ball, as well with the inconsistencies with a mixed backcourt there, going to keep this team on more of a roller coaster level? We'll see how it turns out for Mr. March there, Tom Izzo, but right now it's kind of one of those classic taking your lumps along with getting some nice win Spartan basketball seasons.
Yeah, and we should definitely qualify everything we're saying, by saying it's December. It's a long basketball season. It's too early to start freaking out.
Too early to start freaking out. Though if MSU goes 0-2 in those 2 basketball games, sitting at 5-5, there's still plenty of time. But it's just, I think that was a big getting that early Big Ten win was good for a squad that is still missing captain and starter Malik Hall.
I mean, I think if you're looking at Michigan State's schedule and where we're at right now, you're looking at Gonzaga and Kentucky, and Michigan State was unranked coming into the season. You're thinking you're probably going to lose both of those. Villanova, probably you're hoping to pull it out, but at home, but maybe not expecting a win there. But then again, some losses too, like you noted the one to Northwestern that just kind of make you scratch your head, like, man, I can see how we can play. I see our ceiling. So why are we losing those games? But again, that's kind of how it goes in non-conference play. There's really there's not a lot of expectations that you can set when it's so early in the season and so much more basketball to be played. And unlike football, you can suffer a couple losses and still turn things around in the new year and then be in a completely different footing as you were going into the year. So certainly not too many conclusions you can draw.
No, I just, the big thing to keep watching is going to be those Spartan people who are upset that Izzo didn't go grab another center. We have a center who's playing an awful lot now as a true freshman that was expected to be redshirted, but I do think it just comes back to, Izzo's invested a lot in Mady Sissoko, and he wasn't going to make him feel like he was on the outs coming into his junior season here. So Izzo rolled the dice, and guys like Tom Izzo go down with their ship. So we'll see how it happens. I'm not saying that's where it's going to be, but every time Tom Izzo loses one of those games, he's ready to go back his guys ultimately. And that Northwestern game too it's just one of those college basketball games that bothers you because you're down 4 points, I think, maybe 4 or 5. And there's like 3 straight trips where you either turn the ball over on Northwestern or get them to miss a shot, and you don't yield 1 point. One free throw attempt, 1 field goal. You couldn't get anything on 3 straight trips. And so it just hurts watching that. That'll happen, and like you mentioned, especially in Big Ten play, where every other year, Big Ten is talked about as being good early on, and then when they hit the March bracket season, it was a weak Big Ten. Well, it's kind of happening again. Right now they're saying this is a pretty tough Big Ten. So let's see how this season goes. I do think there will be a lot of cannibalizing within it. I don't think many teams are going to push, that 2 or 3 loss Big Ten record. I think the winner could easily have 4 losses this year, just given the talent in the league.
I could see even more too.
To be honest, it could be.
And like you said, the Big Ten always cannibalizes itself, generally because there is good strength from top to bottom.
And a lot of the high-tier athletes, too, that we see, whether they make it straight to the NBA or, get a 2-way playing position on a team. We have Ayo Dosunmu over there in Chicago and Jaden Ivey, out here in Detroit. These are guys who were on teams that I think got ousted early in their final NCAA brackets, but they're looking like high-quality NBA players, at least early on.
Yeah, it's a solid conference for basketball, and it has been for the last 10 years or so. And you look at Michigan, a team that was ranked coming into the season with the preseason rankings, which aren't worth a damn in my opinion, because you really don't know what you have until you hit Big Ten play.
I've given up on the AP rankings, really, as a whole.
There's just no way to tell, and especially with basketball, that's more of a thing than football. Is you have a lot of freshmen that come in highly touted, and you don't always know which ones are going to pan out and which don't. That's kind of the nature of the beast. Mm-hmm. Some are going to come in with a lot of clout and a lot of visibility into what they can provide to their program the minute that the ball tips off on the first game. But it's a long season. And eventually the dust will settle and we'll start to have a good idea of who's who. And I think other than Illinois' win against Texas, which, Illinois and Indiana, you're kind of looking at them as the 2 top teams in the Big Ten at this point. I don't think that it's like the ACC, right, where it's like, Duke is clearly going to stomp everybody, or North Carolina, last year is going to go on an insane run, even though that was kind of more towards the end of the year. But you don't really have that with the Big Ten. The Big Ten, just like the Midwest, it's like we're solid, we're humble, everybody's kind of around the same level, and everybody fights really hard, but nobody's necessarily going to pull away from the pack again, at least at this point in the year.
Mm-hmm. And how many times have we talked about an Illinois basketball team in the last 4 years that's supposed to be the cream of the crop, and they take L's late in Big Ten season, or, outright drop out of the Big Ten tournament?
Yeah, late in the season and early in tournament play, which you don't need to tell me that as an Illinois fan is my second favorite school to cheer for. It's really tough to watch that they can't close it out when it matters most.
Oh my gosh, man! I had them going so far in the bracket, that last Dosunmu and Kofi Cockburn year.
Yeah, it was brutal. Yeah, I had him going at least, I think, to the Final Four.
I might have had him
it was
winning
either this year or a couple years ago.
I'm such a Big Ten slappy when it comes to basketball.
And that's because all the teams are solid. So you kind of want to pick one of them usually in a bracket to like do some damage. But at the same time, when they lose early, you're like, well, I can see that. At least with Michigan State under Izzo and Michigan under Beeline, it's like they might struggle kind of through the year and just meander through conference play. But you better believe once March Madness goes, they're going to make a decent run there and at least hit the Sweet 16, which is what Michigan has done every year so far under Howard, with the exception of the year that was canceled due to COVID.
Mm-hmm. Which, speaking of things that bother me, I wanted that Cassius Winston last run. That tournament going away with Xavier Tillman and Cassius Winston really hurts me.
That was a good year for you guys too. Like that one had to hurt because you guys won the Big Ten championship. Michigan, I think, was trying to hit the three-peat, and yeah, Cassius said no.
That one honestly is if you could get any back. I mean, they were playing their best basketball season at that point, without a doubt.
This is all that matters.
And that was, speaking of Illinois beatdowns, that's Xavier Tillman took it to Kofi Coburn in that game, and that's someone, just to bring it back to the Spartans the current Spartans real quick. That's someone where like I could see Xavier Tillman didn't start playing until he was a junior, and that's where Madi is right now. Now he doesn't have the people around him like Xavier did with a younger. Not to say Marcus Bingham really wasn't playing that much, but he had a little bit more depth and support. Where kind of now when Madi's out, you're just hoping that they're not dishing it up in the front court. And as I transition now to asking you about your Michigan Wolverines, that is probably Exhibit A for the scariest matchup for State. And again, I do think State's backcourt is a lot better than Michigan's, and that's I'm saying a lot better, just more experience, been in the program there. Michigan's backcourt's had a little bit more of not to say one and done guys, but some transfers there, some younger guys getting some spot minutes. So I do think we'll have the advantage there, but it's the Hunter Dickinson matchup that Michigan State, or at least Madi Sissoko is looking at, because that's the premier man in the Big Ten this year, big man, excuse me. So he's going to want that matchup to kind of prove himself, and to be honest, in those instances is when we've gotten good Madi Sissoko minutes. Gonzaga against Drew Timme looked like a outright monster. Like everyone was like, oh no, Tom Izzo's the man for not bringing in a center. You don't need him. And then after the Kentucky game where he's going against Oscar Tshiebwe, Oscar Tshiebwe was still the best center on the court, but Madi held his own and had a double-double, stayed out of foul trouble, even though he had 4 fouls with 5 minutes left in the second half, and ultimately Tshiebwe in the first overtime gets it, thrown out of the game for that 5th foul, which they need to make it 6 ultimately, especially with some of the ticky-tack fouls that are getting called right now. Point for a different day. But anyways, so let's see if maybe, and that's what I'm looking for specifically, until we play Michigan, I don't think Madi's getting a notable big man, and then obviously Purdue about a week later against Zach Edey. Let's see if maybe it's more of a rise to the occasion, Madi, and when he knows the pressure is really on, if he's going and able to give you that extra gear. Not to say he's not giving it, but it's really been the foul trouble for him in all of our other games. As our center that we're trying to get to play 30 minutes, you know how it is in the Big Ten down low. Talking about humble and working hard. Those guys are working against each other down there.
Yeah, it's a fundamental style of basketball that typically has a lot of action in the paint, and a lot of the offense rolls through the center as well. So yeah, I'm in favor too, especially if refs are going to keep calling ticky-tack stuff. You got to raise it to 6, or else you're just going to continue to discourage real basketball and just place a higher emphasis on shooting threes. And that's fun in the NBA, but it's also not fun. It's like in baseball where the home run, Moneyball, and all the analytics have basically said that the only way to win games is to hit the home run, and the only way now in basketball to win is to shoot 3-pointers because, newsflash, threes are worth more than twos, but I digress. That's kind of where the league's headed here, even in college.
Oh my gosh, man. I know what you mean and don't want to dive into it because it even goes to like some football stuff where the analytics are like, say this, say that. Well, what if they don't come down the field and score and you didn't kick the extra point and now you are down 8? Or if there's odd moments where the analytics can bite your butt where playing good defense, is the real thing that perseveres through some of that. And not to go down there, so let's transition with that. Speaking of teams that really facilitate great offense through the front court, what do you see from the Michigan Wolverines? You gave a really good intro to the Michigan State Spartans, at least running through their games. Just to return the favor here, Michigan ranked early and really looked like they were cooking until they hit that Arizona State team, and I think that was a neutral court tournament.
Yep, that's right.
Yep, so ultimately, that can happen, but it was still a sound beating that had a lot of voters thinking the opposite way. A couple close games against Eastern and Ohio, but obviously we know that's an Ohio team that a couple years ago, I think, disrupted some brackets, and maybe that was even last season. Sometimes those.
They're like a 13 seed that's not a bad upset to pick. They've definitely made some waves.
And I had them, I think, in that one because of that player that was a journalist for a Detroit Pistons website who was playing with them ultimately. And, student journalist who was writing for freelance. And you just love those stories when you hear them locally. And then we know, speaking of another local stories, Imani Bates now going to Eastern Michigan. So, that's a team that, though obviously the shimmer on him has faded a little bit. I mean, that's still a player that is going to be playing in the NBA at some level, whether it's just pushing in the G League, and I mean really pushing in the G League because he's got all the intangibles. It's just the on-the-court / off-the-court stuff. But tough game, tough matchup, and I'm sure Hunter even had to check him up a couple times. So then we get through to Jackson State, a very admirable performance against Virginia, who just always seems to be like the lowest scoring top tier talent ever, or top tier team.
Yeah.
Like, just speaking of, that difference between college basketball and the NBA, Virginia will show you that right there. And then followed that up with a Kentucky game too that was played out in London, and also a good showing. To be honest, I have not seen any games this year for Michigan. I do start watching pretty much when it goes Big Ten schedule. So I'm looking forward to catching some games. See the game against Minnesota tonight. Even we're filming here on a Thursday evening. So Joe, give me the 40,000 feet. How do you feel about Michigan team? Obviously, we mentioned our opinions on early rankings. But though when they've, with the exception of the Arizona State loss, really seems like they've played appropriately in their losses as well. How are we feeling? What's the roster composition look like? And do you have any worries? Do you have, and not to take the piss from you here, but is Hunter Dickinson the way to win for Michigan?
Yeah, I think he is, and the problem is he might be too much of the way to win, Rick, because I had this issue last year with the team that, unfortunately, Dickinson is kind of the only answer, and I know he's a great cheat code to use, but there has to be an alternative method of scoring. Last year, shooting was a big issue, and it came through from unlikely sources. It didn't really pan out, though, last year. I'm drawing the blank on the guy, the freshman from Ontario, but he's no longer on the team, and I didn't really care about that because he didn't do so well. If we start looking through the schedule, I watched the Eastern Michigan game, and that was kind of when I first realized that something was wrong. And the thing that was wrong was that my fears have been confirmed that we still don't have another way to score the ball without going through Hunter Dickinson. Now, Hunter Dickinson's putting up 20 points a game. I have his stats right now. He's putting up 19.6 a game. He's clearly dominating not just with the shooting, but he's also crashing the boards, and he is essentially the only piece in Michigan's arsenal that I can rely on as a fan to actually, count on somebody that can score points and be the leader, and have somebody where
that's tough in college basketball. I mean,
and it's nice to have that. But the perimeter shooting is just still not there. And it was evident against Eastern Michigan. The game against Arizona State, nothing was working. And that was when my fears were really confirmed that, I just don't think we have it so far this year. Couple nice wins. But then, the Virginia game, Michigan was up like 14 points going in the second half, and they found a way to lose on a night when Virginia, which so far this year, they've been torching it from the three-point line. They didn't have the three-point stroke in Ann Arbor, and Michigan still found a way to lose the game. The Kentucky loss, also very close, but, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, and then they weren't able to pull out wins that I would have – yeah, just classic. They just weren't able to pull it out in the way that I've been used to seeing from Michigan over the past decade, where they would have somehow found a way to clutch it out. But instead they dropped those 2 games. So we're sitting here with 3 losses, and I guess I could be feeling worse. At least the losses to the big teams were pretty close. This is very much still a team that is very young. It's Juwan Howard's, I guess, what is it, his 3rd full year now? So we're starting to see a little bit more what he's recruiting and who he's sort of promoting to the front here now that John Beeline's players are, out of the program.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, I'm not too impressed. I mean, you got 2 of Juwan Howard's own sons on the team, Jet and Jace Howard. And Jet's been having a good season, averaging 15 points a game. He's playing 30 minutes. Not as many assists as you'd like to see from a guard, which is usually emblematic of the fact that the shots just aren't falling. They're shooting a lot of shots that maybe that would be getting assists credited to those guards, but they're just not falling. Hunter Dickinson is the guy. We all know that. We don't need to reinvent the wheel too much, but the shooting on the perimeter has just not been there. And so what I'm seeing is a lack of reliable scoring. And if a team is willing to commit 2 guys to Hunter Dickinson, which they have been in basically every game I've watched, what is our backup plan? The backup plan is to knock down the open threes, and they're just not falling.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll start tonight against Minnesota. Big Ten play will kick off in Minneapolis. It should be a game that I would expect us to win, but it is on the road, and it is Big Ten. And the questions that I keep bringing up of how we're going to generate points without our big man, they're still kind of there. So it's nice to see Hunter Dickinson continuing to thrive. I'm glad that he didn't go to the draft again. He stayed with this team. But they've got to surround him with some talent, because right now it's just not working. And if they can't get any production from anybody else, it's going to be another long year, where they're just not going to find their identity. I mean, the identity is going through Dickinson, so I shouldn't say that, but they're not going to find scoring from anybody else. And that's sort of my biggest concern here as I look at this team. Only a month in, like I said, don't get me wrong. It's not time to start, ringing the bell, red alarm, but it is also frustrating to watch, our team losing games because there's just not enough shooting when you need it most.
Mm-hmm. Was it Frankie Collins, the guy who transferred out, that you were talking about?
No, I can't. I already forgot his name because he was very forgettable.
I was trying to look it up quickly. It looks like he transferred out, though, too.
There were a couple transfers that, whatever, I'm not too worried about them.
The only reason I bring it up is because it's a little bit of my point with if Izzo did dip into the center market there. I think, and again, who knows, early on, but, we try and rep our own, the guys who've been here since the beginning. And not just, that's not, I'm talking about Frankie Collins. I'm bringing this back to Mady Sissoko. He's been here for 2 years, so it would have been a real bummer, I feel like, to watch him transfer if Izzo did bring in, some...
Oh, it was Caleb Houston. Excuse me. Yeah, Caleb Houston.
Yeah, he went to the pros, ultimately.
Which is crazy because after the year he had,
Dude,
he was touted as a shooter, and he came in and just absolutely stunk up the joint. I mean, I was so frustrated, not only in the Big Ten tournament, but also in March Madness. And every time the ball was thrown to him, he would be open. It's like it just almost seemed like he didn't have the confidence to shoot the ball properly.
I'm right with you. I think MSU and U of M can find a common ground in Caleb Houston and Max Christie for us, both one and dones, where it really seemed like it was a underwhelming year, and that one more year probably could have pushed you up into the first round, or who knows, maybe even lottery picks. I mean, the guys both had all the intangibles in the world, deemed shooters coming out of their respective high school programs. I think Christie was from the Illinois area, and then you mentioned Houston and Canada. So that was a weird one. Diabate was someone I remember last season. I was like, that guy's got it in the NBA.
He was really nice. He was nice because he got better as the year went on, and he ended up turning into a great option to complement Dickinson down low. Like they were able to go with that lineup and get a lot of
100%. And and that's what he could go do right away, whether it's in the NBA or the G League. He can go be a role player to some baller immediately. Whereas Houston and Christie, and I have not checked. I usually follow MSU Spartans pretty religiously once they go into the basketball, Once they start playing the basketball professionally. No, once they get into the NBA. But I haven't really noticed anything with the Christie, and that must be because I do not like the Los Angeles Lakers, and that's the team that he's on. But, yeah. Dude, this was a guy that should have been coming back, and, part of me as I pull up his stats here, but everything I saw was he should come back and he could really use another year. And you know what? He is averaging 3 points a game, shooting 42% from the 3-point line, which is odd that he's only at that point averaging 3 points a game. But yeah, 11 games played, averaging 11 minutes a game. And then, so clearly, not to talk or not to bring it back to that always, but yeah, so there was those 3-point shooters that we weren't so sure about, and maybe they are sporting that shot in the league, but that's why we love guys like Hunter Dickinson at Michigan, or guys like, hopefully Mady Sissoko can be that here at State, because they stay on that team. They help build it. They help set, the culture ultimately, and in Hunter Dickinson's case, keep bringing that team back, because there's a floor when Hunter Dickinson's on the Michigan basketball team. Yep. Not to say there wouldn't be somebody else, that would fill that level, but when he's there, you know what you're going to get, and then hopefully you can get more. It's kind of like MSU with Aaron Henry a couple years ago. Like, we knew with him on the team, I mean, he brought us single-handedly to the tournament in that 2021 season right after losing Winston. So those are the guys that you really need on the team. It's kind of these one-and-dones that are the sprinkles on it. Yeah, the sprinkles and the cherry, they do make the sundae sometimes, but, I mean, Hunter Dickinson's, that's the cream of the crop right there.
He's the ice cream, baby.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the base.
That's what makes it, And with MSU, I think that's a lot of, our cream of the crop this year is the backcourt. We just got to hope, and like you mentioned there, with Juwan Howard leading them to the Sweet 16 in all of his years, that we're going to have to rely on coaching, because both of these teams need to be brought up a little bit to be able to compete in the Big Ten, I think. Right. Or, I'm sorry, compete for the Big Ten title. Both these teams are going to compete in the Big Ten.
For sure. And like you said, I mean, Hunter Dickinson, he's the base of the cupcake. All the sprinkles and complimentary players are nice, but he's the type of player that every other team in the Big Ten would kill to have. And other than like Trace Jackson Davis over at Indiana, I can't really think of anybody else that's valuable.
This is Hunter's. Well, Zach Edey from Purdue, but
yeah, that's true.
But he's like, I mean, honest to God, and it's like watching classic early 2000s NBA. Like your Dikembe Mutombo, Yao Ming, Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, dude is just a dinosaur in the terms of the style he plays. But in college basketball, I mean, that's going to get you 20 points a game. And don't go away from it, But I do think, just comparing apples to apples there, Hunter Dickinson is a little bit more, obviously has more range to his game. So and then Trace Jackson Davis being the most range to his game. So there's your 1, 2, 3 of big men for sure.
Absolutely. And we'll see how the year goes on here. My biggest thing to watch for is, will those complementary players develop? And if they do, then we'll have something we can work with here. There's already the offensive plan to go through Dickinson. But if they take that option away and the shots start falling and let's say a couple of our guards start to step up, then there will be some confidence to try to open up the offense a little bit more. So that's what I'm looking forward to tonight against Minnesota. Should be a solid year for Michigan still because of Dickinson. Will they be able to reach the next step? That is the question, and that is predicated on everything I've talked about. But definitely looking forward to what we can accomplish.
And with that, Joe and I are going to cheers and finish our drinks. Because that was the Big Ten basketball pregame as it pertains to Michigan State and Michigan basketball.
Well, who else would we be talking about? This is the union of the state, and that state is Michigan.
Not one of these gosh darn teams. I will not. This will be a fun season as Joe and I slap in a little roller coaster seat. When are we going to get the best of our teams, and when are we going to get the worst? And with that, we're going to sign off on another episode of the Union of the State podcast. The only podcast where you get dual coverage of the Michigan Wolverines and your Michigan State Spartans. I'm Good Guy Rick, as always, here with my main man,
Chicago Joe.
And with that, there's only one thing left to say. Go green.
And go blue.